Wayside Works is a developer who makes some good freeware locomotives for Train Simulator, such as the recently released Andrew Barclay 040 saddle tanks, specifically the variant with 16-inch diameter cylinders. There's a common theme amongst his engines, in the sense that they're mostly obscure industrial designs. Today, we're looking at the Ruston Hornsby 48DS, currently the only standard gauge diesel in WW's range, at the time of uploading. But, for the purposes of this video, I will not be doing a deep dive into the history of this class. All I will say is that at least 200 of them were built between 1937 and 1967, while the 48 in 48DS refers to the locomotive's power output of only 48 horsepower. If my research is correct, the Ruston 48 was first released in September 2020, but the version I've installed on my end is an updated one. I'll leave a link to Wayside Works' website in the description, where you can download the 48 along with lots of other tiny and obscure locomotives. Examples include the London and North Eastern Railway Y7 class 040, Peckett & Sons W4 class 040 saddle tank, Hissing Sid, whatever the hell this thing is, and the Andrew Barclay 15-ton fireless locomotive. The fireless and Hissing Sid are two of the strangest engines I've ever come across in Train Simulator. As for how to install this add-on, it's fairly easy. The Ruston 48DS pack is in a zipped or .zip folder when you initially download it. You'll need to extract the Assets and Manuals folder before dragging them into your Railworks directory, an example of which is on the screen now. For reference, I've got TS installed on an external hard drive, but I realise that some people might not have that same setup. Once you're in the game, you'll need to go to the scenario editor. For this example, I've just created a free roam scenario at Chapel and Wakes Colne on the Gainsborough line, part of the freeware Crouch Valley 3 route that I downloaded from the now closed UK train sim. In this pop-out box on the left, you'll need to click the blue icon labelled as Object Set Filter. Then, in the box on the right hand side, scroll down to the folder labelled as WW. No, not that WW. And tick the Ruston 48DS folder. Now you can scroll along the vehicle list until you find the 48DS liveries. Starting off with a showcase of the Ruston 48DS liveries, of which you get an impressive 8 in this pack. The liveries in question are as follows: Ruston Hornsby Works Green, with an open or closed cab variant, Express Dairy Blue, War Department Green, Generic Green with wasp stripes, Queen Anne Chocolate and Cream, John Dewar & Sons Red and White, NKF Weathered Green, which is also cabless for some reason, and Sir William McAlpine Green. My personal favourite is a tie between Queen Anne, Express Dairy Blue, and Lorry's 294266. For context, one of the preserved 48DS locomotives is owned by Laurie Rose, who runs the Laurie's Mechanical Marvels channel here on YouTube. He bought the locomotive from Sir William McAlpine himself, and had her moved by road from Fawley Hill to the Mid-Suffolk Light Railway. Later on, after the engine was restored and repainted, a naming ceremony was held at Brockford Station, with Lady McAlpine herself in attendance. And based on the videos I've seen, 294266 is Laurie's pride and joy, as opposed to his couldn't stand the weather. I'm impressed with the modelling on this locomotive. especially given the number of variants and the fact that this is a freeware pack. However, I don't like the relatively basic cab detail, but for all I know, this could still be prototypical, as I have never been in the cab of a real Ruston 48 to check for myself. I want to make a special mention of the War Department variant, whose works number is 411319, because this thing has a strobe light on her cab roof, an exhaust conditioner on the right hand side, whatever an exhaust conditioner is, and an extra battery box on her left hand side. None of the other variants have these extra features, and if my research is correct, the real thing was built in 1958 and is supplied to the War Department's Bicester workshops in Oxfordshire. She is currently preserved at the Whitrope Heritage Centre in Scotland. There are two Ministry of Defence depots on the Western Lines of Scotland route, namely Longtown and Eastriggs, and I think these are suitable places for any British standard gauge military locomotive, regardless of whether she's a tiny Ruston 48DS or a whacking great big War Department Austerity 210 steam locomotive. The Queen Anne variant is also unusual because of the big nameplates on each side of the bonnet, which hide the grills and make the engine look a little more basic. Some of the liveries in Wayside Works' pack have also been made as 00 scale models by Hornby, including the Express Dairy and Queen Anne liveries. The locomotive that would later be known as Queen Anne was built in 1948 with the works number 265618 and spent her entire working life at the Longmorn distillery in the Strathspey region of Scotland, an area with a long history of whisky production. The distillery once had a connection to the Glasgow and South Western Railway's Craigellachie to Elgin line, as well as the nearby Benriach distillery. While the main line closed in 1969, the small rail network at the distillery itself continued to be used until 1980, but only to transfer malt and casks between the various buildings on site. After the closure of Longmorn's railway network, 265618 was donated to the Strathspey Railway and painted in the distinctive chocolate and cream livery. Queen Anne is the name of a premium whisky that was produced at Longmorn, and for all I know, it probably still is. I'm no expert on the Ruston 48DS, especially since I've only seen one of them in real life, and even then, she was just parked in the yard at the Plains Railway. I wasn't sure what to make of the in-game sounds, but I was pleasantly surprised to see that, according to the manual, they were recorded by Laurie Rose himself and imported into the game by Forth's Games, the man who also made the LNER Y6 tram engine add-on. So the 48DS's sounds are at least recorded from the real thing, and I haven't much of an opinion on them, but I will say that this tiny locomotive ironically makes an awful lot of noise, especially at full power, and dare I say it, the horn sound is kind of cute. This thing is very slow and weak, but that is to be expected from a small shunter. She has a top speed of only 10 miles per hour, which is even slower than the Class 08, and the driving experience is distinctly different from most diesels because the 48DS has manual mechanical transmission. You have to close the throttle and change gears before applying power again. First gear takes you up to 3 miles per hour. Second goes up to 6, and third goes up to 10. Driving the 48DS reminds me of the Class 03, which is another small diesel shunter with manual mechanical transmission. The 48DS doesn't have air or vacuum brakes, and the only way to stop this thing is to use the handbrake. She's ideal for hauling around 3 to 10 wagons or coaches in a yard, but not much more than that. At the end of the day, I'm generally impressed with the Ruston and Hornsby 48DS and Wayside Works' models as a whole, especially since I've rarely noticed any bugs with them. The 48DS is not ideal for everyone, due to her low top speed and limited power output, but I can still recommend her to anyone who just wants to potter about in a small locomotive that's fun to drive in a little shunting yard.